Hi, welcome to Voices. I am your host, Keith Major. Atlantic Caribbean Union consists of 4 conferences. The largest by far of these 4 conferences is the South Bahamas Conference, which has at least 42 churches, many ministers, many teachers, and a large membership. But it was not always like that. There was a time when there were few of these things present. One of the persons that were there at almost the beginning is my guest today, Pastor Neville Scavella. Pastor Scavella, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Pastor Scavella, what was it like? When did you join the Bahamas Conference, which was South Bahamas Conference had previously been? What year was that?
It was in the year 1955 when we graduated from West Indies College at the time. And so that was the year when we joined.
And what was it like? We didn't have 42 churches, did we?
No, we didn't have 42 churches. In fact, we only had 2 churches in Nassau.
Okay.
And we had a number of churches in the Family Island, which probably were about 15 or so. In most of the islands,
Okay.
except Grand Bahama and Meguan and Inagua, but most of the other islands had churches.
So how did you staff these? How many? You said there were 2 or 3 in Nassau.
Yes.
And how many ministers did you have? And how did we deal with the Family Islands?
Well, the Family Islands were serviced mainly by the president of the mission at the time.
Okay.
And they would visit maybe once a year or every 2 years. Sometimes in Crooked Island, where I'm from, might have been 4 years. And so, because I could remember, I was ready to get baptized when I was early, but no minister came until I was 16.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's what you call waiting on the Lord, huh?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Oh, that's very interesting. And what led you into the ministry?
Well, I give the credit largely to my grandmother, Lucy Scavella. When I was at the age of 5, she said to me that she wanted me to go to Mandeville and to become a missionary, she said.
At age?
At age 5.
Okay.
And so that sounded good to me, and I thought I would work toward it. But as the years went on, of course, a number of things happened over those years. But every now and then it will pop up in my head.
Okay.
And so when I came to Nassau at age 16, I involved myself with the churches that were here. We had a couple ministers who had meetings, and I always took part with them. There was Hanson Waller. I think he kept a crusade in Fox Hill at the roundabout.
Roundabout, yes.
Yeah, there was a little lodge hall there. And there were Elder Custer, who kept a meeting in St. James Road,
Okay.
another little hall. And I could remember we had a couple baptisms from that one. I always operated the projector, and
Okay.
I was always around the church.
Yes, all right.
Yes.
And so one day you got the call.
Well, like I said, we were poor.
Okay.
We didn't have any money to go to school. And so when around 18 or so, I decided to ask my brother, Hugh, if he would go to school. At that time I was working, and I told him I'll pay for him to go to school.
Yes.
But he said he didn't want to go. And so I decided, well, I suppose the Lord wanted me to go. So when I reached 19, I made up my mind fully to go to school. And I told my cousin, Silas McKinney, and he jumped on the bandwagon right away. So he'll go too. And then we all decided it was McKinney, Brother Rollins, that is Lester Rollins, and
Yes.
myself. The 3 of us went to school together.
Okay. Were there other Bahamians? You went to Jamaica, I take
I went
it?
to Jamaica.
Uh-huh.
There was one Bahamian there who was Dr. Macmillan, Curtis.
Dr. Curtis Macmillan.
Yes, he was there because his parents believe in Christian education, and they sent him to school. So we met him there.
Okay.
But he went off into dentistry.
I see.
Yeah,
And
so-
you left here to go into the ministry.
Yes, I left.
Both you and Pastor.
Yeah, both of us decided we were going to the ministry,
Okay.
and so that's how we
And how did
started.
you fund your way through school? Those 4 years was it?
Well, it was 6 years altogether
Okay.
because when I left Crooked Island, I only had 4th grade.
Okay.
And we did some night classes when I decided to go with Pastor Ari Cooper, of the Baptist minister. We did some night classes
With
to
him.
brush up. And so when we got to Jamaica, they put us in 9th grade after they give us a test.
All right.
And so we started from there. And we went on from 9th grade until we graduated from the 14th grade as ministerial students.
Okay. So you finished then West Indies College, which is now Northern Caribbean University,
Right, yeah.
and you came back home and you were hired by.
We were hired by the mission at that time. It was Bahamas,
Okay, Bahamas Mission. All
of
right.
Seventh-day Adventists. Yes. Elder Colburn was then the president, and so they employed us. I
Right.
think I was the last one to be employed.
I see.
Pastor McKinney came home married, and so
Oh, and you didn't.
no, I didn't.
Okay. All right.
It was 2 years after before I got married.
Okay.
Yes. So we were both hired. I was in the Book and Bible House for a time being, and then I was assigned to Pastor Shaw as an intern who was pastoring Grandstown Church.
Okay.
And then the Ingliston Company was
Right.
then in operation as a Sabbath school. And so he put me in charge of that
Down in Engliston.
in Ingliston.
Uh-huh.
And we had people like Pearl Macmillan, J.B. Dean, Cecil Cartwright, Verance, and all of those were there in that. And so we grew in that church. And that was the 3rd church that came on stream,
Okay, Engliston.
Ingliston,
Oh, okay.
in Nassau.
So after Engliston, you.
Then while I was at Ingliston, they sent me, in fact, I requested to go to the island.
You requested.
Yes.
Okay.
And so they sent me to Exuma.
So you would have been the first or second pastor assigned to the Family Islands, other than the president.
Yes, I suppose.
Okay.
Maybe I might have been the first,
first.
except that old brother Paul Ward,
Yes.
he was employed as a minister, and he worked chiefly in the Family Islands,
I see. Okay.
in San Salvador, Cat Island, and also in Andros.
All right. All
Yeah,
right.
but chiefly in Cat Island,
Okay.
because he raised up 5 churches there all by himself.
Okay. All right. So you went to which island was it again?
I went to Exuma.
Exuma. All right.
Yes. And so they had one church, they had 2 churches there, Morstown and Mount Thompson.
All right.
And so that's where they sent me.
And how long did you stay in Exuma?
I stayed in Exuma about a year.
I see.
And then Pastor McKinney, who was in Andros, decided he wanted to go to Andrews University.
I see.
And so he resigned to go to Andrews University. And so they asked me to go to Andros.
Okay.
And so I went to Andros. But I was only there about 6 or 8 months. Because after that, they asked me to come to Nassau
Okay.
to be with the mission. And they give me some departmental work to do. I was again placed in Ingliston Church.
All right.
And I had lay activity, Sabbath school, and so on.
So when did you receive your first full control of your first district? Which?
Well, I was ordained in 1949.
Okay.
1959, sorry. Yeah, that's when I was ordained, 1959. And then they give me, well, my first district, like I said, was Exuma. Then they sent me to Andros, where there were 6 churches. When I came back, I was in Ingliston for a time, and then after a while, for whatever reason, I served as pastor of Grantstown and Ingliston, Shirley Street and Ingliston at different times. And so I can't remember all of the sequence, but, but that's the way it started.
And there was a time you went off to California, I think it was?
Yes, well, before that, Pastor McKinney and I went back to West Indies College.
Oh, okay.
Because we came only with an associate degree. We went back and we did our bachelor's degree in theology.
Okay.
And so that was in 62. And then in 1972, I decided I wanted to go to do a degree in counseling, in pastoral counseling, because I saw great need among our members. And so I went to Loma Linda. And I did apply to Andrews, but afterwards I decided to go to Loma Linda. And so that's where I did my degree in counseling.
Okay. So as you grew the family developed, you had 2 children.
Yes.
Paul and
Gardell.
And Gardell.
Oh, his name is actually Neville Gardell.
Oh, he's named after you.
Yes.
I see. Okay. All right. Yes. And what was the state of Bahamas Academy during this time?
Well, as far as I was concerned, the Bahamas Academy was doing very well.
Okay.
And both of my boys went there.
Yes.
We were living in Pyfrom Addition at the time, and they walked to Bahamas Academy.
Okay.
From there. During that time, I was pastoring Grantstown Church.
Okay.
And we started a school in Grantstown Church, and Gardell went to Grantstown Church at the elementary school there. And so that's how we...
I noticed some people have started these schools with the churches. What's the philosophy behind that, schools with churches?
Well, we believe that the home, the church, and the school should go together. And so in a number of places, actually I was inspired about having a church school when I went to Atlanta and saw the Cleveland, his church. He had a nice church school there, and that's what inspired me to start one in Grantstown.
Okay. Now you were more than a district pastor. You also served as an administrator here and abroad.
Yes.
What position in administration did you serve here, and how did you get abroad?
Well, at first I was asked to serve as the treasurer, and in those days the treasurer and the secretary was one person.
Okay.
So I was secretary-treasurer for the Bahamas mission of Seventh-day Adventists. And then afterwards, when I went to school in 72, when I returned, they had a new treasurer, so I served only as the secretary. And so I think that's the time when they separated the secretary from the treasurer.
Okay.
In 73 when I came back. And so I was secretary for the conference at that time.
Okay. And we can't cover everything, but you served abroad as president, I think, of the Cayman
Island
mission. What was that experience like?
Well,
and how did that happen, first of all?
Well, it happened in this way. At the session, they elected a new secretary, and they asked me, the president of the union, Elder Fraser, asked if I would serve in the Cayman Islands as the president.
Okay.
And so I told him I was willing to serve wherever I was asked to. And so that's how I went to the Cayman Islands.
So it wasn't a difficult decision to pick up and go?
No, because I've been picking up and going many times.
Yes, yes.
I went to Exuma.
That's right.
I went to Andros.
Yes.
And so
back to West Indies College,
back to
California.
Yes. And so I decided it was okay, and
Yeah.
of course I discussed it with my wife,
Yes.
and she was always willing to go wherever I
Right,
went.
right,
So
right.
it wasn't a difficult decision for us to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so we served in the Cayman Islands for 7 years.
7 years.
7 years.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. All right. And then after your sojourn in the Cayman Islands, you came back
Yes.
here, and where were you assigned then?
Well, when we came back, they asked me to serve in some departments.
Okay.
Because over the years, I've served in every department in the conference.
Everyone,
Everyone,
including youth?
including youth.
Yeah, okay.
Youth was only a short stint, however.
Okay, all right.
But I serve in every department,
Yeah.
including the youth department in the Bahamas conference. So when we came back from the Cayman Islands, at the time, I suppose all the departments were filled,
I see.
and so they asked me to serve. I don't remember all the different
Right,
areas,
yes.
but eventually they asked me to take up the district of the Flamingo Garden Good News Church.
Oh, good news, yes.
Yes.
Now, I want to go back to Cayman, because 7 years as an administrator must have been some things you've done. What are you proudest of in
Yeah.
your work in the Cayman? What are some of the things you did there, or some things that happened?
I look at the Cayman Islands as one of the bright spots in my ministry. When I went down there first, I sat down and drew a plan of what I wanted to accomplish, what the goals were. When we arrived there, we found that there were only 400 members. The operating capital was less than 50%. And so I wanted to see growth.
Okay.
And so during my time there, we saw the Lord really bless the ministry in the Cayman Islands. And when I left, we had added 2 new churches.
Okay.
The membership was then 1,100.
Okay.
We had an operating capital of 300%.
300%.
300%.
Okay.
And it was the most fulfilling
Yes.
of
yes.
my ministry, I would say.
Okay.
Until today, I think almost everybody, we still have a very good relationship with the
With them,
Cayman Island
yeah.
people. It reminds me a lot of the family islands here.
Yeah.
The people were very kind. They were very frank. They'll tell you whether they like you or not.
Okay.
But
Well, to survive 7 years anywhere in a place other than your country has to be some
Yeah.
kind of getting along.
Yeah.
We have to take a break now. My guest is Pastor Neville Scavella. We'll be back with him, and we'll continue a bit more on the discussion on Cayman.
Sweetheart April, sweetheart April, that calls me from a world of care, and it bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and my wishes known.
Welcome back to Voices. We're continuing our discussion here with Pastor Neville Scavella. And when we had our break, Pastor Scavella, we were talking about one of the more exciting parts of your ministry. How many years did you say?
7 years in the Cayman Islands.
And total, your total ministry.
The total ministry, as a full-time, was over
Right.
55 years.
Over 55 years.
Yes.
And one of the brightest spots is that 7 years
In Cayman Islands.
in the Cayman Islands.
And the
that's
next to that would be Freeport, Grand Bahama.
Freeport. Well, let's talk about Freeport then, because we have to move on to some other subjects. But there actually was some more stuff I wanted to talk about in Cayman, but let's move to Freeport because our time is limited. Freeport, tell me about Freeport.
Freeport is one of the highlights of my ministry as well. Where I spent a lot of time with the young people. We had good times at camps and so on. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know, that the Maranatha International program that we view on 3ABN every week actually began at 8 Mile Rock in Freeport.
Is that so?
When I was the pastor,
Okay.
a group, a gentleman and his wife, who was a photographer from the United States, came out with a number of young people, and they offered to help me at the 8 Mile Rock Church that was in progress at the time. And it was there that he was inspired to begin this organization called Maranatha. And so he worked on 8 Mile Rock Church, and then they call themselves Maranatha. And so I was at the beginning of Maranatha at the 8 Mile Rock Church. If you look on the internet, you'll see all that information
Is
there.
that so?
Yes.
That is, for no other reason, this interview is worth just that. I did not know that. That is very good.
Yes, that is a fact.
That is very good. So Freeport, you spent how many years in Freeport?
I spent 3 years in Freeport.
Okay.
Yes, and we renovated the Freeport Church, and we completed the 8 Mile Rock Church.
Okay. Back then it was only
It was only two churches at the time.
Okay.
And that's in Grand Bahama. We had one in West End.
Ah, yes.
West End was the first church.
West End was the first before the other two.
8 Mile Rock was the second. Pastor McKinney and I worked together on a crusade. He was the preacher, and we started the 8 Mile Rock Church. Freeport didn't come on until later because the Freeport Authority didn't want us to come in Freeport. It was only because of the Prime Minister, Sir Lyndon, that intervened on the conference behalf that we were able to get into Freeport to start churches there.
Okay.
And so that's how the churches started in Freeport.
Other churches weren't allowed in Freeport either?
Yes, there were other churches.
But not us?
No, not us.
Okay.
Yes.
All
So-
right. It's very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. Well, I got to move on because I want to talk about some current stuff. How has the church changed now, Pastor, from your time? Is it easier to pastor? The members more faithful? Is it more challenging? Well, what notable change have you recognized?
Well, to me, the change is a number of our churches and leaders seem to want to follow the other churches in their presentation of the good old Advent message. That seemed to be the trend. And then the music and some of the other things. We from the old school, we believe in the fundamental biblical way of presenting the gospel. And so there's been some changes. Maybe some of it is justifiable, but we like the old-time religion.
You know, you mentioned something that the General Conference President gave in his annual end-of-year speech. One of the points was that we are trying to be too much like the we're trying to be too much like the others, and
well, we were told that we have a distinctive message
yes.
for people of this time. We are not just like any other church. We are the remnant church
Right.
to prepare the world for the second coming of Christ.
So we're not priding ourselves in being different like we should.
No.
That's one of the main
Yes.
things. Any other things you've noticed? There are some issues with the church now. Women's ordination and that sort of thing is creating quite a clamor. How do you see this? I'm not asking you your point of view, but how do you see this? Will this split the church? How do you see this turning out?
I don't think it's going to split the church. I believe that the church will do the right thing. We have systems in place that we have an organization, and whenever the church decide that they want to go in a particular direction or stay where we are, the decision will be made. And the important thing that Jesus said that we should do is to be one, operate in a unity, not going off in our own direction. Because Jesus said he prayed that the church might be one, even as he and his Father were one.
Yes.
That we should be united and work together. So we don't expect the church, some piece to split off and go in their own way and so on. I think we will be organized, united church until Jesus comes.
Because you know this issue on women's ordination, there are whole divisions
Yes.
that support it and whole divisions that don't support it.
Yes, I know
So this is not an easy thing.
Yes, well, I think it came up several times while I was
Yes.
at General Conference. The General Conference, that is the church from around the world meeting together, did not go with it
Yes.
before. I do not know what they will do.
Okay.
We live in a progressive world, and there are changes sometimes. But whatever the church decides, I'm sure that the Lord is going to lead and direct and decide which way the church will go when we have our next General Conference.
There's one historical point I want to bring in. You served for a while at the Johnson Park Church.
Yes.
And when you came there, we had a bus that somebody had given us.
Yes.
That didn't make sense.
Right.
And I think you led us in selling that bus
Right.
in order to create a new church building,
Right.
which we now worship in happily,
Yeah.
because we were in a wooden structure.
Yes.
You go ahead. You remember?
Well, I'm not a believer in church owning buses.
Right.
We had one when I was pastor of the Centerville Church. We sold it and used the money for something else. Unless you have a good driver, a dedicated, committed member who's only going to do the church work, you're going to run into problems. And so I have never been, from the experiences that I've had,
Yes.
unless you have a good, committed driver who's going to use it only for the church work,
Yes.
then a bus is only a drag on the church.
You have no idea how powerful that statement is today. All bus drivers beware. Pastor Scavella, you are retired.
Yes.
What are the needs or concerns of retired people these days? And I know there's an association has recently been formed. Just I think Sabbath afternoon you had the church service. First of all, what are the needs of retired pastors these days?
I think it's something for camaraderie, that we can still associate one with the other, still encourage one another, and we can give advice if they're sought after.
Yes.
We don't want to be over stretching ourselves, but if they ask for advice, I think from our experience we can help in a number of areas, and we can help one another to in our personal needs and also in our spiritual development.
Yes.
We can have a sort of comradeship among retirees.
I'm sure throughout your ministry, a major part of your ministry was seeing the hand of God in your crusades, in your work and everything. Nowadays, how do you see the hand of God in your life as it was then? I mean, how does he help you during this time as a retiree versus in active ministry?
Well, I have my morning devotions, and I try to keep close to the Lord.
Okay.
And so we do what we can. But there has been some changes in the general thing. I know that, I think for a minister then and now, like Jesus did, the strength of a minister is visiting his members.
Explain that. I mean, elaborate on it.
My best sermons that I believe that I preach came from the experiences I got from visiting members.
Oh, okay.
During my ministry.
Yes.
I'm not an evangelist
All right.
or anything like that, but I believe that I've been a pastor who was consistent, and I find the strength of my ministry was I found it in the homes of members that I was able to pray with and talk to, and they give me their experiences, which helped to strengthen my own spiritual life. And I think that was the key to my the success in my ministry.
That's a beautiful point. Pastor Scavella, you are not unlike George Bush, former president of the United States, in that he had a son that also served as president. You served as president and came in. You now have a son who is the current president of the South Bahamas Conference. Is that I'm sure this must be a source of pride to you. How does that relationship work? Does he seek advice? Do you tell him, "Well, I did it this way, son. You ought to do it this way"? What's the positive? What's the big thing in that?
Well, I have two sons, and I never told them what I wanted them to do. My first son, my favorite Bible character was Paul.
Okay.
So I named him Paul.
All right.
The other person that at that time that inspired me while I was in school was a man called Adlai Esther from the General Conference. Yes. So that's his second name.
Okay.
Now, I never told Paul that I wanted him to be a minister. He made this choice on his own. Okay. He told me that it was a sermon that I preached that caused him to make up his mind, which was gratifying to me.
Yes.
But I never directed him.
Right.
In his ministry, I try sometimes tactfully to say something, but I don't dictate to him what he should do. He has to fight in his own armor. I pray for him and so on. If he asks advice, I'm willing to give, but I don't be the one out there to try to feed him with what I think he ought to do. So that's the way we operate.
Okay. It's nice to have a father, and you're the president. Oftentimes, ain't too many people you could trust like blood.
Right.
Yeah, you could trust like blood. And so, as you look around the conference today, what would you do to, I guess, enhance the religious life of any of his members? Or is there something, if you had your way, you would do nowadays?
Well, I said my thing is I would be more personal with individual, visit more, talk more. Each person has to do it, I guess, his way as the Lord leads him into a different avenue, and depend on the Lord to guide you as to what Israel ought to do.
So you would say that the major difference between pastoring and being an administrator, because certainly as an administrator, maybe I don't know, as an administrator, you wouldn't have had the same time to visit members, or is that not so? I guess a pastor is a pastor, huh?
Yes, yeah, you have, a pastor should be doing more visiting. The administrator does too, because people come to him for advice, and you have to go this way, that way. Sometimes it's more challenging because they bring complaints about this one, about the pastor, about the members, and so on. So you have to have wisdom to know how to answer Israel. But it's two different roles, and it is challenging.
Well, certainly, if you had to say something to members for 30 seconds, if you had a message you would like to leave with anybody, what would you say for 30 seconds to someone?
I would say that the Advent message is the same today as it was when it was first delivered to the saints. We have not changed. It might seem as though the church has changed or individual, but the message is the same, and I think we should try to stay in the same path that the Lord has led us when we first began.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. My special guest, Pastor Neville Scavella, a wealth of wisdom, a man who served for more than 55 years in ministry, was here before this vast growth in this conference, and still able to point out lots of historical points that we never even knew. He was even tied to the formation of Maranatha International. Isn't that something? Ladies and gentlemen, you have been given a treat today, as I have been. Pastor Scavella, thank you very much for being on the program. Hopefully, we'll be able to have you back real soon.
Thank you.
Please join us next week as we continue this series in which we are talking to retired pastors, trying to tap their brains and find out what used to be and what is and what might be. Next week, we'll be having an interview with Pastor R.I. Hannah. Thank you very much.